Hi, Dan. It's good to see
Hi,
you.
Taylor.
It's February 4th here, and this is the Love Foundry bringing you today's podcast. So, what's on
Right.
the menu today, Dan?
I'll tell you what's up, and then we'll go from there and make it short today because I'm introducing something that we're going to continue when we get more time. And if we can get Seb back on board, we have some scheduling problems around here, and we've burned down the entire city of the Palisades. So things are a little chaotic in our departments, like they were in Lahaina when you burned it down. The heck, wherever we go, we seem to be burning the place down. I'm not sure if I like that.
And destruction is the first act of creation.
I tell that to the folks that are living in motels. What I'm looking at is that which resists in us. What is it in us that resists, and what is it that doesn't resist? And how do we determine what's up with that? Now, that doesn't make any sense, so we're going to have to ease into the idea of what I'm talking about. Because this is the Love Foundry. This is the place where you take on the concept of anchoring love in your conscious experience as a reality, as an energy in and of itself, indivisible, united with all creation, and a part of you, a part of your anatomy. And if you're going to do that, if you want to do that, then we start with that. We start with that desire for you to do it. Now, how does that live with you? How do you think about that inside yourself? Is that something that you make room for in you, or?
It's a bit more of an adventure in me. It's like, it's when there's something to resist against, there's an anchor point. So there's something to reach for. You can reach from that point. But when you're going into something that doesn't have any resistance, like the energy of love itself, there's no resistance in it. And it makes it, it's like we've had this duality experience from the get-go. And when there's not that, then how is there this? It's hard to
Right. Okay.
navigate and find
So
your way.
pause there for a minute, because that's the first step. I think everyone who is honestly looking to become more aware of this reality in them has to start with exactly that. We are living in the ego. We're living in the human personality, and it lives from resistance. It's the physical and the emotional and the mental energy that makes up the ego derives its identity from pushing against and finding resistance.
Mm-hmm.
That means that mental energy, at the level of which we experience it as human beings, finds resistance in the mental substance. And that gives us back thoughts, and the same thing with feelings. And we have feelings, and then we've organized those thoughts and feelings and sensations into a sense of identity and a
Mm-hmm.
sense of management
Mm-hmm.
of the world in which we live. Now we're looking at the idea, and that's our anchor point. You've got to love that. You've got to start with that. That's what you got. That's where we are. So when we stand there and then we look at something that has zero resistance, it comes into the universe and finds nothing to react off of. Something like you might think of X-rays. X-rays just zip on through, and we don't see them. We don't feel them. We don't think about them. But they're coming in from the sun all the time. We're being
Mm-hmm.
X-rayed all the time, especially when we're flying around some of those airplanes up there where the atmosphere is thin. So, but it doesn't really harm us. And so we have this passing through. And so what are we going to do when our ego is built out of mental substance, emotional substance, and physical substance that by its nature resists certain energy to take appearance in us. What do you do if you want to become knowing of an energy that has zero resistance? Which means it's a higher frequency, which means it's coming in at the level where it's above what we would call, in the esoteric world, they call concrete mind, which is the lower mind, the mind of the ego. Now, we are crafted by the nature of the soul nature in us. We are crafted by the divine intelligence. We're crafted to be able to respond to this energy coming in. But you can't respond with resistance. There just is no such thing. And this energy that's coming in is not an energy in and of itself that we would be able to identify. I'm just setting some stage for you, and then you can argue with that stage. It's passing through the body of an entity, angelic entity. There are countless, not utterly countless, but for our purposes, countless levels of energy in the universe before you get up to the level where it's utterly intangible and pure spirit nature. So our sensitivity to those, what we would think of as higher energies, which does not mean they're up there. It means their frequency is higher, and they're very definitely in there. They're in there in us, and they're higher in frequency, and they connect us if we know how to appreciate them and make them tangible to our senses. Then they bring us information about those beings and whose body those energies manifest. But when you get to the level of what we think of as archangels, what we think of as beings higher than we're used to affiliating with in a conscious way, then we have to adapt to their reality. We have to take on their presence, because they're not going to bring their frequency down to the level of reactionary energies, which is what the ego's doing. And the ego, because of being built out of what it is built out of, it can't traverse into those higher frequencies. It's like water. It's bound to the level of functionality that it exists. It can make steam, it can make ice, it can make water, but it's still water. And that's the limitations of its physics. That doesn't mean it's not living. Everything is living. But it's not going anywhere. You have to break it down from water into hydrogen and oxygen if you want to raise to a higher level of its own nature. So setting aside our ego for a second, we realize this is, if this is true, if what I'm saying is true, and you have to look inside of you and see how any of this conversation lives in you, if it has any merit in you, because how it lives in me is utterly irrelevant to you. I'm working on developing the ecosystem of my inner self. And there's a number of different types of human beings. So your ecosystem in you may appear to be quite different than mine, but we're all part of the same life. So what I'm saying, and what the Love Foundry is doing, is we're laying a platform for standing up on the material self, the ego self, which is where that's where all of us are living. We're all living on that platform. And we have resistance in mind and resistance in emotion and resistance in physical, which give us a sense of presence with things. But if we want to know what's going on that level that has zero resistance in the material world, and I'm counting dense mental substance as material, it's matter. It's just matter at a really high state of development, as emotion is matter. And physical world, gas and liquid and solid, is matter. And the definition of matter is simply that which resists. Where substance can be a frequency of living embodiment that has no resistance to us. It has resistance within itself. For example, spirit is not going to drop down and become obvious at a level of maybe abstract mind or even a level of the soul, because it's such a dynamic energy at the level that it does exist. Even though it's in us at that level, we have that level in us, but we don't bring the energies of that level down into this material objectivity, because it would create perhaps friction or create perhaps too much energizing. So there's a natural unfoldment to us as human beings. And here we are doing okay as a human being. We're doing all right. You've got your day worked out. You've got Maui worked out. You've got weather worked out. You got the kids worked out. You got their consciousnesses worked out. And there, inside them is this same resistance. They come up against thought and feeling, and it shines back at them and produces a thought or a feeling, which we think are our own, but they're actually pretty much something just being reflected back. Now, we generated the intention, so what gets reflected back is our feeling or our thought or our physical sensation. So if we want more than this, if we want to get up into the register in ourselves where love itself becomes a current coexistence with us, we're going to have to work at it a little bit. Now, that's the stage that an enormous amount of human beings are entering. There are a major amount of human beings that are not entering that stage yet, but they will relatively soon, because as human beings start to awaken to the truth of what we're talking about here, even if we're speaking about it badly, as they start to awaken to that, they're going to start having conversation with each other, and which is great. And it'll be really different from somebody in a completely different set of circumstances. And we're going to watch, and the moment that we take this step because you want to, the moment your intention falls upon love as something that is to the moment for you an intangible energy, then a whole set of parameters are starting to unfold in you. And one of those parameters is that you can't identify love by resistance. It won't appear that way. It's like looking at a red barn painted in red next to your property, and you look over there and go, well, that's a red barn. It's a red barn because the paint on the barn is reflecting the frequency of red back to your eye, and you see it. It's also solid because matter is reflecting back energy, and it also has feelings, although we don't know what those feelings are about the barn. They were put into it by the creator of the barn. And as far as thought, it's pretty unsubstantial, but there's a thought in the barn about its purpose and about what its service is giving and all of that. There's a lot to a barn, but the love aspect of it is just passing right on through. And the only way we're going to know it, the only way this is going to be a successful passage, is if you step in and give yourself identification with love itself in you. In other words, you have to take it on as self, because there's no resistance to show it to you. It's kind of an either or thing. If you take it on yourself and say, okay, this energy is coming through into the universe and it's doing these amazing things. And we have a history of amazing things that love has done. We have the history of Jesus. We have the history of Moses. We have the history of all the people who have encountered love and made it a part of their expression. By what? By identifying with it, by taking it on in their inner self and saying, I accept this as part of me. And thereby you turn yourself around, in a sense, instead of looking at love, saying, show me something, show me the face of God. Well, it becomes impossible, doesn't it? Because there's no resistance to the face of God. There's no resistance to love. So you can't see it. And that produces to the ego, that produces a serious conundrum, which just says to itself, well, shit, it doesn't exist. There's no such thing, because I can't register it. I can't get the meter to jump off the peg. I can't get my inner sense to go, but wait a minute, did I just feel something? You know, it's like, okay, because there's a borderline in between love and subtle energies that make up our personality self. So we're starting out into that borderland, and we're saying, okay, I'm interested in expanding my range. Now that's all a very scientific sounding process, because in the last analysis, it's a science. It's the science of love. And you are the meter, you're the equipment. Your body, your biological self is equipped to function in the environment of love and to eventually build something so responsive to love that you essentially radiate it as love out to the world. And that puts you in an enormously positive relationship to the environment you're in and to everyone in it. But in conflict with that is that part of the ego which says, I don't want that. I don't want to identify with God or love or some universal energy or some great angel that's carrying those frequencies down to me. I want to get love from somewhere outside myself. I want it to come to me. I want it to come to me from you. I want it to come to me from my dog. I want it to come to me from my cat. I want it from my kids. And I want to give my love to them. That's what the ego has built its reality upon. And so we're looking at these reactive energies that resist us. And because life is in those energies, we know that love is in there somewhere. So we keep looking for it. But it isn't visible in its true nature because it just goes right through. It doesn't stop to talk to you. It just loves you. And now, if we bring ourselves up into the range of that frequency, what's going to happen in our consciousness that's different from what's going on in your consciousness now? If what I'm saying to you is true, how does that make sense in you? Does it at all?
Well, it sounds like, because you're never going to get objectivity in there, but there sounds like there's a little step along the way that you can kind of look at this substance rather than trying to find the objectivity. Because how do you start to identify with something that is completely...
Exactly. Now, okay, but let's look at that, because that's the first thing. Okay, well, then I'll identify with the angel through which love is coming.
Right, but there's no objectivity to that, really, either.
No, because it's not resisting you either.
Because it's in
See,
love.
Without resistance, what am I going to do? There's
Right.
no way out except to grow out. You're going to have to grow. I'm sorry. But when you grow, it's not going to kill you to grow. In fact, it's going to be a joy to you to grow because it will open up infinite new horizons for you to participate in. But it's going to cause resistance in your ego because it can't do it. It just can't do it. You can beat a blind man about the head and shoulders as much as you want and tell him to see, damn it. But if he's blind, he can't. He cannot see the color, and he can't participate in the world of color until he can see it. But what he can do is he can imagine. There are people blind as a bat who aren't really blind, so I don't need to misstate and diminish bats. But there are people who can tell what color something is by simply putting their hand over it. You can give them something red and they'll put their hand over it and go, okay, they won't know that's red until you tell them what you're feeling right now. That sensation is red. Here's blue. That's going to be cooler. Put your hand over the blue. Put your hand over the green. That's going to have a real earth tone. Put your hand over the purple. That's going to give you a different flavor of sensation. Mm-hmm. Now, how are they feeling it? They're feeling it because of their blindness, they have augmented their sense of contact in their emotional body and in other bodies that we possess to the point where they can discriminate frequencies that the rest of us are missing.
That's true in musicians too. You see, like,
Oh God, yes.
reminds me of Jimi Hendrix. You know, he'd always talk about the color that he's playing, or the, you know, it wasn't the sound, it was the color he'd associate with more
Well,
than.
and yeah, that's true. And in the esoteric world where the the sacred languages come from back before Sanskrit, they were languages that involved color and sound. It was sound that could be seen and color that could be heard,
Mhm.
and sensation and physical symbols. So that language can be grown into, but of course you aren't going to grow into it unless you can identify in that substance those relationships. So, and science has a difficult time because, see, material science has chained itself to a very insensitive instrument, matter. You're way more sensitive than matter is, even though your body is built out of it, because you have this sensitive emotional nature and you have a sensitive mental nature, and you have inside of you a soul nature which has intuition, and it has all these other inner qualities. So you can do some pass through in yourself and create a world in which love and you are in the same borderland.
Mhm.
But you're not going to change the laws of nature. You're not going to make love tangible as a resistance to it, because it doesn't exist in the world of love. Love is a universal pass through, it passes through everything,
Mhm.
and it gives life and creation and organization and order and sense of unity to everything. So you could put up a flag, but it's going to go right through it.
So
So
as a
you're going to,
starting point, you know, what's the starting point? Because it feels like, you know, you're just, you know, Elon Musk's car just whirling through endless space with nothing to
right, because there's nothing in the car.
guide.
There's just a dummy in the car. There's nothing in there to raise its frequency to being responsive by identification with the love that's passing through that part of the universe. I mean, we're coming into a place in the universe where Aquarian energies are pouring through the earth. That's not an astrological thing, that's an astronomical thing. That's an actual physical fact.
Mhm.
It's demonstrated to us through a calendar, which is sort of a made up thing. But our solar system is moving in a 25,000 year cycle around a star, and that star takes its path through various constellational influences. Now, we can argue about what those influences are, whether they're living or conscious or unconscious, or how much love is engaged, but we're passing through it. We're passing through space, and we're passing through it in a spiral cyclic way because of the rotation of things and the spinning around and all of that. So, what are we going to get out of the tangibility of ourselves as we pass through that space of Aquarius? It's coming into our influence, as Pisces was when we were at that part of the circle. It's a 25,000 year circle. So we're moving out of Pisces and moving into the influence of Aquarius, and nobody's measuring it. Nobody knows how to measure it because there's no resistance in our instruments. We can look at the stars and we can see the physical objects in their rotational movements through space, and then we can infer from those objects where they are and where and if they're radiating energy, that energy must be impacting us. But we don't have a meter that says, oh, okay, now we've got 2% more Aquarian energy right now than we did last year. But you can certainly see the impact on Earth of changes going on. And while we have the tendency in our ego to subscribe all those physical changes to matter, to the material universe, to carbon in the atmosphere, we also are beginning to realize there are other unseen energies radiating through the space, and they are impacting us. Now, how much impact, we don't really know because we can't resist them sufficiently to measure them, but you can. And that's why people like Tesla and other highly sensitive inventor types, they had all of these crazy conversations with people, and people say, what is he talking about? Because he's talking about the frequencies of a crystal and the impact of thunderstorms on himself. And he is so sensitive in these subtle areas that he's having all of this impact. So we don't care about all of the esoteric stuff of it. Our function is to bring love into personal interaction with your life in a conscious, creative way. Because if you can do that, it's transformation and transmutation and unity, and the joy of its grace will begin to penetrate and influence your life, because you're acting in harmony with it. You're bringing yourself into a living harmony with the radiating essence of this beingness, this love. And we want that to become a known and tangible experience to people. And it will. And it's starting to do that. And as it does, you're tuning into it. But you're not tuning into it as something where you're resisting. Your weird sensitivity is tuning into the flow of it into you. And you're having to find yourself answering to it as a part of self. It's like, who are you? Well, I'm you. Where'd you come from? You. So you see, the answers don't square with the intellect. They don't. It's like Schrodinger's cat that's either dead or alive. Things are happening here in this interaction with love that don't have a material, tangible way to be platformed. But you are a platform. So if we stop making it either or, and stop looking for a way to make one right and one wrong, and start embracing everything, then you're on love's side, because it's embracing everything without resistance. So it's already embracing you. It's already passing through every atom of your being without any resistance whatsoever. Now you want to make that passage through you something conscious and tangible. You can make it conscious and tangible without creating resistance to it, to make it appear. Now that's offensive to the ego, because it doesn't have any other way to relate. It's like people who the only news they got was from the newspaper. Well, news is going on the air waves, isn't it? It's going on all around the planet. Something's actually really happening somewhere. But until it showed up at their front porch and they read it in the newspaper, the Times, it wasn't real. Almost wasn't real. And then airwaves brought it in, and Edward R. Murrow and the boys came out and gave you all the news that was fit to print, or they gave you the vocal news on the radio show, and those became events going on in your mind now, because you're connected to what happened in Europe or what happened in New York or LA. Somewhere, man bites dog. So we're just expanding our base of operations into a zone in ourselves where love suddenly becomes a companion in consciousness. Now, a companion with you have a companion. You got Johnny, he's your companion. You've got Olivia, and you've got Az, and you've got Phoenix. I mean, you've got a little tribe of companions going on with you, and they're in your life, and they're real, and they're bringing in all kinds of things that have nothing to do with how you see them, or their reflected personality egos that are being built. And in the past, because none of this was knowable to us until suddenly someone like Jesus shows up and says, wait, there's a whole thing living in here in me. And if you open your relationship to it and have a companionship relationship with it, suddenly you and it are co-creating together. And the co-creation that you're doing is very different from the co-creation of a person who's just living in the world. He might have been able to make a good living as a carpenter. I don't know. I don't know if he was any good. Reputation says, yeah, he could build something pretty good. But he didn't need to do that with his life because he had other experiences going on in him that raised him into an entirely different level of support of the human race. It's really a good carpenter is really a wonderful person to know. You got to have one on your mailing. Who do I call when I'm really in deep trouble? I used to call Isla Cable. Isla Cable was a Danish carpenter who apprenticed for 7 years under a master carpenter in Denmark. Isla could do anything with wood, anything, free-handed. Just point him at the trees, and pretty soon you've got a spiral staircase in your house. So it's great to have a good carpenter book along with other things. But if you got Jesus in the book, he kind of stands alone with things that he can support in you. And so does the Buddha, and so does others that have. So we don't want them building cabinets, no matter how good they are. We want them doing what they're doing because they're expanding our ability to co-function with love itself, with things of a higher frequency, things that we are already, but we don't know it yet. So we have to develop our sensitivity to them and our identification with them. And then eventually we can turn ourselves around and we in love can be loving the world. You don't know what love's doing, loving the world, except that you're loving the world as best you can, day to day, moment to moment, through your kids and your family and your chickens and whatever else you got going on out there in that yard. So our work at the Love Foundry is to bring this conversation into a reality in you, so that when you stand embracing love, that means something to you. It's real to you. Because if it is real to you, then you will know of it. You will know of love. And then when someone turns to you and says, "What's up with love?" you have something to offer from your own experience with it. But it isn't knowledge about it, because that's part of that reactive and resistant. If you give knowledge about it, that's not against the law. You can say it's a beautiful thing, it's a deep thing, it's a wonderful thing. I see it as a red rose kind of thing. You can talk about it. But if you want to know it, you're going to have to find it in yourself. My knowing about love is in me. And the greatest foundation we can have with human beings at the Love Foundry, or any place that we're teaching anything to anybody, is how it lives in them. How does it live in you? And that's something that Jack knows and gives you, who's one of our directors. Jack is a great soul. And at 93, he knows that more than he knows any other thing.
It's a life well spent.
It's a life learned. He learned that what I think about it, what the Buddha thinks about it, what anybody thinks about this stuff or has as an opinion about it or has as an inner reality with it, you get up every day and light your candle or do whatever you do or pray to the sun god or whatever. However that lives in anyone is theirs. How it lives in you is yours. And Jack's always concerned with, how does this live in you? Because that's where you're growing. That's who you're going to become. So that's our first step. The first step is who you are and how you see and anchor in you something invisible, intangible, and completely out of your normal range. Now that sounds like a tough thing to do, but it isn't. It's natural. You just open up some of those sensitivities that have been not used very much because there's nothing to see. So the only way you're going to see something in the air is if it resists and reflects some energy back to you. Then you go, oh, what's that? That's a rainbow.
Yeah.
But you see a rate, huh?
Oh, I was just going to say the place I always start to open up those inner sensitivities is I just tune into the heart. I put my focus there because it's really really receptive. It's picks up
Well,
on those
that's the
finer
lens,
things,
isn't it?
and it grows from there, and you'll start to sensitize. Your mind will get more sensitive and your perceptions. But I always start there. So I just thought I'd throw that in there as a place to
Well, I think for
focus.
you, and that's true for me too, by the way, I start with the heart. I lead with the heart. I live in the heart because that's my fundamental energy. But when you're talking to Elon Musk or you're talking to other types, a magician, the type of person who becomes an actuarial for an insurance company, their root energy
Mm-hmm.
of the wholeness of the energy that makes life and love a cosmic thing, their root energy is more of a sub frequency of that.
Hmm.
And as is my own, except my sub frequency is a sub frequency of love, not a sub frequency of intelligence or will or one of the other qualities of life.
Hmm.
So that's why we really have to accept how does it live in you,
Right.
because that's where you're going to find your way. Like a salmon going upstream, you're going to find the place at which you become more than you are by following your current.
Hmm.
And the current doesn't say anything to you, it just comes towards you and we move in it. And what does a salmon do, or another fish going upstream? It finds the current that satisfies its sense of resistance, but it doesn't see it. It doesn't recognize that current by a color or a frequency. It senses it. It senses that this is the resistance I'm looking for. And how does it sense that? Well, it senses it with temperature. I mean, if you want to catch fish, I can tell you how to catch fish. I just quit catching fish because I like them. But if you want to find them in the lake, you find where the cold water comes into the lake. And that's where you'll find fish because they're moving towards that cold water. There's just odd things we don't think. I'm sorry, fish, I didn't mean to give away one of your protective secrets. But so fish are swimming upstream, but they're not doing it blindly. They're following their sense of temperature, their sense of resistance, their sense of flow, their sense of food pattern. Although a lot of fish, when they're going upstream to spawn, they're not eating anymore, so they won't pay attention to the food, which is why you can't catch them on bait easily. You got to do other things. So I'm just making the point that your inner senses can find their way to love. And when it does, you can do something that sounds fake. It sounds like you're faking it. You're forming love around your own imagination, around your own visualization, which is true because we're in a duality stage. Over here is the ego and everything we've learned and experienced. And over here is the universe of love with all those things we've never given ourselves yet. So, in this dual stage between going out of this stage and into that stage, you're going to have a lot of passage. Well, we have to help people understand how to negotiate that passage so that the love part becomes strong enough to start transforming their life. So that in the midst of chaos where the world is ignoring love, you are developing an increasing and constant harmony with it through your own capacities that can't see it, can't register it, can't taste it, can't know it, but yet you're committed to the idea that it's there. And you're going to invest your time and energy and effort into that, in you, not in me, not my lessons about it. We can read Socrates, but you got to become Socrates. You got to find your way into it. But when you do, and it becomes a worldwide phenomenon, which is starting to do, humanity will lead itself out of the limitations of itself and into the fantastic, limitless boundaries of the creative power of love. And then we will start learning how to apply that to ourselves to transform all the negative in our life, including those negative things we do by habit, like getting angry and lonely and stuff. Those are reformation projects that we have to do about ourselves, and judging other people and not liking those Egyptians or whoever it is that we decide we're better than or we're not. It's all equal, it's all love, and it's all one. And the last struggle of it will be to get rid of the desire that we have for that reflection. You want someone to love you, probably. We all do. It's nice to be loved. But when you become the source of love itself, where are you going to go to get it? From someone else who's imperfect at it? We have to develop a whole new sense of relationship to each other when we're all generating and growing into the power to love itself, to be one with it. And then comes this stunning discovery that we're all becoming the same thing in love. It's us. And we're all connected in it. And it's one thing with each of our individualities in it, in a different way, in a different experience of it. And it starts to open up this incredible, wonderful golden age of humanity, because we're all learning the lesson of coexisting with love consciously and not unconsciously. Is that all right with you?
Yeah, it almost sounds like you start to accept your own worth. You start to realize your true worthiness is love.
Yeah, it's bottomless, topless. It's the width of the universe, your worth, because it's the worth of love.
But it's almost like that's a hard acceptance, at least for
yes,
me.
It is, because what are you going to do with it?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're just going to grow in it, and until you become truly helpful, because you're just giving so much of it to the world, and then you're not looking for it in the world, you're producing it in the world. And other people will still say, well, I don't see it, I don't taste it, where is it? Well, you just give it. And by knowing you're giving it, it becomes extremely potent, extremely tangible. And other people will go, wow, what did I just feel? That's all there is to it. And then they have to turn around in it and identify with it as well. And we're all then identifying with exactly the same thing, inseparable from itself, as well as being our individuality. Anyway, that's all I have to say today. Taylor, how about you?
That's great. It's wonderful.
All right, well, we're going to build on that. I want to build on that for the next several podcasts, because there's more to it than that.
Yeah. But I think you're right. I think we need to build on that and let that rest.
Good.
That's a good spot. Okay. Thank you, Dan. It was great to connect today, and we'll be in touch.
All right.
Bye. Aloha.
Don't you wanna know?